Well, hello everybody and welcome to our Tim at 10. Today is July 25th, 2023, and today we're going to talk about consistency and intention, ways of building a strong classroom. I thought this was a very important webinar to go over today as we continue to navigate past the pandemic and enter this new normal that we are in the classroom, and just really navigating, through the behaviors, through the challenges. It's kind of important to understand just not why consistency in the classroom is so important. We hear that so many times from our directors, from our administrators, that, consistency is so important. We have to have consistency in the classroom. But no one really ever tells us why. Why is consistency so important? So I thought we would spend a little bit of time this morning and kind of talk about the science behind consistency and intention and why it is so important, not only for the children that are in the classroom, but most importantly, why consistency is important for the adult. Whether you're an administrator watching this webinar or if you're a teacher watching this webinar, I think you're going to get some information today that's going to be very helpful in whatever role that you play in your program. And so that's what we've got on our agenda, and this is going to go really, really fast. So I've tried to narrow the information down so we can keep this in less than an hour session. Now, if this is your first time joining one of our Tim at 10s, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. This is being recorded, so if you're unable to watch it live, you can always go back and watch it either on Facebook, or this will be put on our website later on today. And you will have an opportunity to earn 1 hour of training for watching the webinar today. At the end of the webinar, I will post a link that will take you to our website where you can complete a worksheet and get your certificate of completion. And there is a $5 fee for that certificate of completion. If you just want to watch the video, watch away, all right? So that's kind of how this works if it's your first time. If you've done many of these Tim at 10s with us, then you're an old pro. You got this. You know how it works. There you go. I see lots of people hopping on, so good morning to everybody that's watching this live. I'm so happy to see you and happy that you're interested in this very important topic. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and talk about consistency. And the reason why I called this consistency and intent is that we have to understand that consistency is intentional. It's something that we have to work towards. It's not something that comes natural to us. Even though we're going to talk about the brain and we're going to talk about neurons and cells and how they connect, believe it or not, it's not something that comes natural. So you have to be intentional when it comes to consistency. When we talk about this in the classroom and with teachers and with students, you have to work towards this. Just like any intentional goal, you have to set your mind to it. Now, the more you practice, just like anything else you do, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. And it's not so much that it gets easier, you just get better. Right? And that's true whether you're learning to play baseball or you're going to go bowling or roller skating or playing a violin or playing the piano. It's not that it gets easier, you just get better. And that's what we really talk about when we talk about intention. So consistency is no different than any of those things right there. The more you practice, the better you get. All right. So that's that's why I wanted to include that intentional part in this title, because I want everyone to understand that you really have to focus on the consistency part of it. All right. The other reason why, I really thought this topic was important for us to discuss. Y'all have heard me talk a lot, as we've gone through the pandemic, as we're navigating past the pandemic. We've talked a lot about attachment figures. We've talked a lot about attachment styles, and especially with the lack of engagement and the amount of distracted adults that the children have been exposed to, both at home and in the classroom over the last 3 years, with all of the additional responsibilities that's been placed on us, all of the precautions that's been placed on us, the challenges, especially for parents that are working from home but also trying to care for their child. We've created a lot of avoidant and anxious attachment models with a lot of the children that we're working with right now. And I've got a webinar on my website on understanding attachment figures. So if you want to know more about that, I'm going to refer you to that particular webinar. But I kind of want to talk about how this kind of blends together right there. All right. I see someone is asking me a question unrelated to the topic that we're recording today. So if you could just give our office a call, they'll be happy to answer that question for you that's unrelated to this workshop. All right. So anyways, why is it important to understand healthy attachment in regards to consistency? Well, when we talk about disorganized attachment can sometimes happen when children are not exposed to consistent caregiving, to consistent teaching. This is a downfall of that right there. Definitely, we can talk about avoidant attachment, where the child eventually just gives up on the adult being present for them. They kind of give up on an adult creating a felt sense of safety in the environment. So they create an avoidant attachment style. Or in some cases, it creates an anxious attachment style where the child becomes very clingy. They need a lot of attention, and they kind of go above and beyond to seek that adult's approval and attention. That can also happen in these scenarios too. And once again, kind of go back to my webinar on understanding attachment to get more information on that. But with the inconsistency, the trauma that could create where there is not a felt sense of safety, that's where some of the disorganized attachment can come from. And especially if the adult does not practice composure and actually harms the child, that can definitely trigger this. But we're seeing a lot of this right now. So how does attachment and consistency come together? It comes down to routine, and it comes down to predictability, and a healthy attachment figure being consistently there for that particular child, so that when the world is not going the child's way, when there are perceived threats of danger in that child's life, they need that person that they can go to that will create that sense of safety, right? And once that is established, and we do have consistency in the classroom, and there is a consistent attachment figure in place, the whole game changes. And those of you that have experienced this, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like the connection is made, the attachment is made, and your classroom is a whole new place. But what happens when that is disrupted? What happens when there's not the consistency in place? Well, we establish a sense of presence. We establish routine. We establish structure, which all of that is part of consistency. When we want to define, we want a global definition of consistency. It's that routine, it's that predictability, it's that structure. When a teacher is not present, neither is attachment, routine, or structure. And I'm not just talking about a teacher being physically present. Now, definitely, if they're not physically present, then all of the established felt sense of safety from the attachment figure, the routine, the structure, all of that goes out the window if a teacher is not present. But even if they're mentally not present, so their body is there, but their mind and their spirit is not, and it's in la-la land, okay? When you've got someone that is checked out, then you also check out routine and structure and predictability and that felt sense of safety. The other thing is, and I'm not trying to do a guilt trip thing here, y'all. This is not my intention, is to create a guilt trip, but I just want y'all to see the science behind this. When a teacher calls in sick or when a teacher doesn't come to work, all of the established attachment, routine, and structure also calls in sick. So you can't expect for routine and structure to remain in place if the healthy attachment figure is not present, right? So kind of always keep that in mind, that when you call in sick, so does structure and routine and predictability from the child's perspective. When a teacher quits, okay, or a teacher walks out, so does attachment, routine, and structure. Okay, so when you're walking out, if you get upset with that director and you decide to leave your program, you're not just leaving that director or that school, you're taking attachment, routine, and structure away from those children. And sometimes when we hire new teachers, they walk into a brand new classroom and they're like, oh my gosh, there's no routine in this classroom. And you're like, yep, because the teacher that left took it with her. All right. She didn't leave it behind. Structure and routine and predictability wasn't left behind. When the teacher walked out, she took it with her. All right. So that's why you have to create that attachment and you have to establish structure, routine, and predictability yourself. All right. But it's not something that can be left behind by the previous person. Okay. So I think that's important for everyone to understand as well. Now, when a teacher is present, then a healthy attachment style, routine, structure, and predictability is also present. All right? So that's what we're going to talk about kind of moving forward right there. So then, when, you have a child that goes into distress when the world is not going their way or when there is a perceived threat of danger, such as they get stepped on at circle time or someone takes the block away from them in the block center, to them, that's a perceived threat of danger. So when that happens, it provokes fear and anxiety, which activates the attachment system. And at that point in time, the child seeks out their attachment figure. If the attachment figure is present and consistent, then they can respond, oh, that was scary. Your friend stepped on your hand. Breathe, you can handle this. I'm here for you. Right there, just that response and that teacher being present for that child, that's going to, increase security. It's going to regulate the child's physiology, and it's going to turn the attachment system offline. The exploration system goes back online, and then the child can continue to play and learn and grow. And that is what's going to happen on a consistent basis. So let's talk about consistency now that we kind of understand that part. All right. What does consistency in the classroom establish? And again, we're talking about consistently being present, consistent routine, consistent structure, consistent predictability. First off, it creates physical safety, all right? So physically, the child has that felt sense of safety. The environment is safe. The learning centers are safe. The behavior of the other children are safe. But most importantly, the behavior of the adult is safe, all right? So physical safety is one. Then you've got the psychological safety, or does the child feel mentally safe? Right? So when we talk about a felt sense of safety, there's three things that we're looking at right here. The physical safety, the psychological safety, or does the child feel mentally safe being in that classroom? And the third one is the emotional safety, all right? Their ability to regulate themselves, their ability to have a sense of belonging, their ability to cooperate with others. So those are the three things, and y'all might want to write this down because when you do your worksheet at the end of the webinar to get your certificate, this is one of the questions right here, by the way. But consistency creates physical safety, psychological safety, and emotional safety. All right? Now, the other thing is, like I said at the beginning of this video, we're really going to focus on both the teacher and the child. All right, so the adult and the child having a consistent routine, being consistently present, is also going to establish physical safety, psychological safety, and emotional safety for the adult. Right? When an adult is in a consistent pattern, when the adult is in a consistent routine, they also feel safe. The more the adult feels safe, the more they can connect with the child. And they get to download that felt sense of safety to the child. So one thing I really want to start talking about, and a lot of my upcoming workshops that I've got planned, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot because it's so needed right now, is what I'm going to call a shared sense of safety. The adult must feel safe before the child can feel safe, and vice versa. But we need to kind of really focus on this shared sense of safety. And not just between the adult and the child, but you're going to hear me talk about this when we're talking about your school family and your coworkers. When you're building unity in your program, you've got to have a shared sense of safety amongst the adults in your program too. We're very, very divided right now between us and them. In this world, in this nation, even within our schools, we've got a division between us and them, and we've got to really work on those connections of bringing people back together. And I've got another workshop that's coming up that we're going to talk about that. But there's where you're going to hear me talk about the shared sense of safety amongst the adults too. All right, so there's one thing right there. The other thing when we talk about consistency is the foundation for long-term achievements, all right? So, going back to early child growth and development, that we've got all these cells in our brain, and during the first, 12 to 24 months of life, we build the most connections in the brain. We do that from the connections we make on the outside, so the connection between the child and a teacher, the connection between the child and the parent, the child and the family, the connections between child and other children. Connections on the outside build connections on the inside. So the more we connect, the more cells come together in the brain. And this creates neurological pathways. And neurological pathways create the ability to learn, right? The ability to solve problems, the ability to cooperate, and it creates willingness, all right? So connection drives willingness right here, and that's the neurological pathways in the brain. So when we talk about consistency is the foundation for long-term achievement, this kind of goes back to our brain is a pattern-seeking organ. Our brain craves patterns. It craves sequences. It likes routine. It likes structure. It likes predictability. And that's the neurological pathways that are connected in our brain. So I want y'all to imagine, kind of like if you're driving from Dallas to Houston. And I'm saying that because we're here in Texas, so most people in Texas understand the interstates here. But if I'm driving from Dallas to Houston, the most logical route would be to hop on Interstate 45 and shoot right down south to Houston. But what if there's a wreck and Interstate 45 is shut down? There's an obstacle in the way that's preventing us from getting to our destination. Well, we've got Google Maps nowadays that we can pop into Google Maps or Waze or Apple Maps or whatever, and it's probably going to find us another route. But, those of us that have been driving for a long time and we used to drive without these maps, you learn different routes, and you know that there's different highways, there's different roads that can get us to our destination. We may not get there as quick as going down Interstate 45, but we can still get from Dallas to Houston a different route, a different way. That's like no different than how the brain is. And when we talk about creating multiple neurological pathways, when it comes to achievement, when it comes to the ability to learn and cooperate, there are multiple different ways of getting there. We just have to create those pathways, okay? And consistency is a great way of forming those neurological pathways, right? So I think that's pretty important to understand right there. The more predictability we put in place, the more successful someone will become. And this is true for children, this is true for adults, okay? So we want to create multiple connections in the brain, multiple neurological pathways to get there. Focus on predictability. Throughout the classroom, when you create structures, when you create rituals, you're focusing on predictability. Now you've got to be consistent to do that. And it's got to be a consistent, healthy attachment figure leading those routines and rituals for the children. All right? So that's what we're going for right there. The more connections that we make, the more you can learn. So kind of also going off of that analogy of the highway, the interstate from Dallas to Houston, and creating those multiple routes to get there, consistency also enables you to develop new habits, all right? So the more consistency we have in place, the more new habits we can create. And what we want to focus on here is that with a healthy attachment figure, meaning an adult who is present for the child and there for them, we're able to create healthy and secure habits rather than aggressive or harmful habits, disruptive habits. And sometimes that's what a lot of teachers focus on in the classroom, is they focus on the unhealthy habits, the disruptive habits, those aggressive habits. Well, remember, what we focus on, we get more of. So if you want something different than those negative habits, then let's focus on the healthy habits, all right? And consistency is going to help you with that. So consistently focusing on acts of kindness, helpful acts in the classroom, focusing on celebrations, focusing on accomplishments, all right? And doing this consistently, we create those neurological pathways for healthy habits, all right? Now, the science behind this right here, in the absence of a routine, the brain is going to fill in the missing pieces with what it knows. All right? So in the absence of a routine, in the absence of consistency, the brain is going to fill in the missing pieces with what it knows. So kind of imagine when you were a young child and you used to play hopscotch, right? And you would hop through the single squares, and there'd be the double square where you would spread your legs apart, and then you would come back together to the single square. And that was creating patterns and sequences, but it was in a physical fashion, which, by the way, we need to bring this stuff back, y'all. Get your chalk out there and create your hopscotch out there on the playground, because it was a wonderful activity for us, for development. But anyways, getting back to my point, if you were doing hopscotch and you were doing your single square, double square, single square, imagine if one of those pieces went away and you had to fill in the blank. Well, if I'm hopping along, your brain is going to automatically fill in that missing spot with what it knows. Okay? And so that's a good analogy for you to understand that right there. Well, there's no difference when it comes to the neuropathological pathways. I just messed that up. The neurological pathways. I need to slow down because I'm trying to get this in on time. That's in the brain. Okay, so when you've got routines in place in the classroom, when you've got structure, when you've got predictability, the brain is going to fill in those missing pieces. If that routine or structure is not in place, then the brain is going to go to what it knows. And that's going to go back to past experiences. It's going to go to temperament, and it's going to go to past experiences that that child may have. Now, you've got to look at what is the temperament of each individual child, what is the experiences that each individual child has gone through, and it's going to be different for every single one of them, so there's no cookie cutter approach to this, but that's what's going to happen when these items are not in place. Okay, I've got predictability, I've got predictability, I've got predictability. Whoa, I got a missing piece. What do I do? Well, what do I know? Okay, and my know, what I know might be to fight or just simply withdraw and retreat. And that might be what I know. And since there's a missing piece, then I'm going to go with what I know, right? Or to be defiant or to push back or whatever that may be, any of those survival skills. Okay, so hopefully that kind of makes you understand when we talk about enabling your ability to develop new habits, healthy habits. You're filling in those pieces. You're filling in those pieces, so you're giving them more of what they know. All right, and you're going to practice this approximately 2,000 times in context before the child knows it. All right, so you can't go, well, we did it last week, they should know it. 2,000 times in context. All right, then you can put it in their bucket. All right, so that's the other one right there. The other thing, and this one, I really think about this one with the adult. When we talk about how consistency helps the adult achieve their goals and to achieve success, but it's important for the children too, because anyone that's ever worked in a 2-year-old classroom understands this one. But consistency helps you build momentum, all right? And when we talk about building momentum, we've got dopamine that is released from the brain when you complete a task and you are successful. So anytime we do something well, our brain is releasing this joy juice that we call dopamine. And that is your natural juices that makes you feel good, that makes you excited about yourself, and I did it, and I am a rock star. And that's what we want in the classroom, is we want those natural juices flowing in the brain. We don't want the Red Bull, we don't want the cup of coffee, we don't want, whatever energy drink you drink or whatever. We want those natural joy juices. And that's what consistency does, is the more we do something over and over again, the better we get at it. And that's what I talked about at the beginning. Things don't get easier, we just get better. And again, when you look at the science at that, we just get better at it. Our brain is releasing more dopamine when we complete a task well, right? And right there, that dopamine is going to build confidence, right? And we want our children to be confident in their skills. But this is where I'm like, I think this is important for the adult, because when we have consistent adults that are doing their job well, all right, they're more likely to show up. They're more likely to be present and be there for, whether it be the children or the other adults or whatever their role is in your school. But that confidence is going to drive them to be there, okay? So that's what we focus on right here. We want to feel accomplished, Like, I'll give you an example, and this is so me, and I've talked to many of you in the past, and many of you have shared that you're just like me. I love to make lists. I think one of my favorite apps on my phone is to make a list, and then when you complete a task and you can hit that little button and it goes and it goes away, man, dopamine just right. It just flows out of my brain. I feel so good whenever I'm able to hit that button that I've completed a task. Come on, how many of you are like me? You probably put things on your to-do list just so you can mark it off, right? Because it feels good. That right there is a great example of momentum and a great example of that self-confidence, right? And that's the dopamine that's released from our brain. And that feel-good feeling of momentum and confidence and that rush that we get whenever we're able to accomplish something is better than any Red Bull, Monster, energy drink, coffee, whatever you've got. All right? We just don't get enough of it. And I'm sure a lot of you, whether you're a director or a teacher watching this, when you're in that classroom and you're just rocking it and you're like teacher of the year material and your classroom is engaged and everyone is attached and everyone has a felt sense of safety, you feel good about yourself and you feel good about your skills and you're like, I got this and I'm going to work here for the rest of my life, right? And you just can't wait to come back the next day, right? So, there's an example where, if everything is the opposite, there's no felt sense of safety, there's no attachment or connection, the kids are bouncing off the walls, you're like, I'm going to apply at the fast food restaurant on my way home tonight. So, again, and that's going to disrupt the consistency part of it right there. All right. And then, this one right here is huge here because with consistency, when you've got a consistent caregiving, when you're consistently present, when you've got that established routine, that established structure, that felt sense of safety, then this is going to help you, know the difference between what is important to you, all right? What is important to you and what is not important to you. Or I like to call this consistency allows you to pick your battles wisely, right? Because when we're triggered and the world is not going our way, we tend to get ourselves all worked up over things that really don't involve us at all. Or we get ourselves all worked up over just petty stuff, And so, when we're focused, when we're in it, all right, then we know what is important to us. And we're able to set aside those things that are not important, right? So, when we look at this, with consistency, it creates perception, all right? And when we talk about perception, that's your thoughts, your feelings, your values, your judgments. All of that comes from the way you see things, the way you see that child, the way you see a situation, all right? The way you see the world. And that's your perception. Your perception determines your behavior, all right? So your willingness to be open and present, or your unwillingness to be closed and cut off, right? Am I going to react to a situation or am I going to respond to a situation? So our perception, the way we see a situation, determines our behavior. Am I going to be willing or am I going to be unwilling? Your behavior influences your relationships, all right? So when we talk about relationships, that's your willingness to connect. Am I willing to connect with this child? Am I willing to connect with this teacher or this parent? All right? And trust. Do I trust the other person that I'm working with? Am I willing to collaborate with the child or the adult that I'm working with? And your relationship is what's going to establish that. And I think that, this is a whole 2-hour workshop in itself right now. The willingness to connect, the willingness to trust, and the willingness to collaborate. Do we have enough people in this country right now willing to do that? No, because we're very divided into us and them, which is why all of this is so important. So again, your perception determines your behavior. Your behavior influences your relationships. And your relationship is going to affect your growth. All right? Your mindset shift. Am I willing to practice something new? Am I willing to perform a different way? Am I willing to accept accountability? Right? Am I willing to take ownership over what's going on? All right? And that's all affected by your relationship. So your perception determines your behavior influences your relationships, and your relationships affect your growth. And then your growth is going to upgrade the perception of the next situation. All right? So that's all what's going to happen right here with consistency. So hopefully y'all can kind of see this little pattern right here. And if you need to go back and rewatch this, or at least this part right here, I think that's really important. But you've got to have that consistency to do this. And that, again, that consistent attachment figure, the consistent routine, the consistent structure, the consistent predictability for this model to work. All right? When you don't have consistency, you don't have the ability to see things different. All right? And then it just spirals downhill from there with your behavior, with your relationships, with your growth, with your ability to upgrade. All right? And then, consistency sustains accomplishments. And here we talk about the power of unity. Consistency brings us together. When we are consistently in this together, all right, then we can accomplish more. Otherwise, when you don't have consistent teachers, when you don't have consistent, children don't have consistent caregivers in the classroom, then it feels like we're just constantly having to rebuild. We're constantly having to rebuild. And then the tower crumbles down and we got to start all over, right? But when you've got consistency, it's like we can start building, all right? We can start sustaining accomplishments. We can start celebrating. And that's the power of unity. And another big focus of conversation that I've been having here lately, and again, with my upcoming workshops that I've got planned for y'all this fall, you're going to hear me talk a lot about building your school family, a lot about those connections within your school, right? Because we've got to focus on the power of unity. We've got to focus on we're all in this together. We've got to bring people back together. We got to get rid of this us and them mentality, all right? So when we are able to bring people together, then that's going to create the connection, the cooperation, the collaboration, right? And again, we're talking about young children in a classroom working together to create a felt sense of safety, to learn and to grow, but it's also the adults within the school. Think about a sports team. And a lot of you are excited because football is about to start back up. Training camps are getting started. I'm a baseball person, and so especially right now as this video is being filmed, we got the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros going at it head to head. And so that's pretty exciting for me because just this whole Ranger Astro thing that we've got in my family and friend circle. When sports teams, when they've got consistency in the locker room and the players are consistent with their skills that they practice, when they're consistent with their unity, you see it on the field. This is basketball, this is football, this is baseball, this is soccer. There's been so many books written about this. There's so much science behind this. You win in the locker room first. And it starts with consistency. When you've got a team that is disconnected, right? When there's no unity in the locker room, you see that on the field. They're very disorganized. It's chaotic. There's like no communication, and they're typically not very successful teams. So, for those of you that needed that sports comparison, because I know some of you are like that, you can look at that right there when we talk about sustaining accomplishments. But I do think that the sports analogy is a great way of explaining that right there. All right. Consistency also attracts admiration. All right. Consistency inspires those around you. And I really want y'all to reflect on this. Many of you have role models or mentors or people that you look up to that really inspire you and kind of bring life into you. And one thing you'll probably notice about those mentors or role models is they normally practice a lot of consistency. They've got routine, they've got structure, both outside and inside. And that's what brings success. Now, when we talk about this in the classroom, I want y'all to think about the consistency of the language of safety. When we talk about an adult's outside voice becomes the child's inside voice. Y'all, if y'all take any notes today, that's a big note right there too. An adult's outside voice becomes the child's inside voice. We are creating their inner speech, right? And so an adult's you talk becomes the child's I voice. You are a bad child. You are disruptive, all right? You don't know how to dress. Well, all of that language, the child interprets that as I am disruptive. I don't know how to dress. So the adult you talk becomes the child's I speech. We're creating the child's inner speech, that voice that we have inside of our head. I don't think people realize how powerful that is, that we're creating that inner speech. And if we really want to get deep into this, you can go back to your own childhood, your own upbringing, and you can definitely pick apart your parent or your guardian's you speech and how that became your I voice. Okay? Now, with consistency, when we talk about, consistency attracts admiration, consistency inspires those around you. It's that you speech, the you speech, and that's creating the I voice. You pushed in your chair so that the other children will be safe. You walked safely to the playground door so that we could go outside, right? And you can see the difference how that can be interpreted into the child's inner speech, their I voice. I walked safely to the classroom door. I was helpful. I pushed in the chair so that my friends could be safe. And we're going to do this consistently, right? And with the power of unity that we talked about earlier, that creates encouragement. And our children need encouragement. Our adults that we work with need encouragement. And always keep in mind, what children see, children do. So we want to model this. We want to constantly model this for the children in our classroom. And then the last thing that I've got on consistency and intent is consistency opens the door to opportunities. Okay? When we are able to see things differently, when we are able to establish those healthy relationships, when we are able to see the opportunity and growth in everything we do, no matter how successful I was today, I can be better tomorrow. And be humble and hungry so that you always want to be better and better. And that's what consistency is going to do. It's going to allow you to see things from that perspective. Consistency opens the doors to opportunities. The opportunity to teach and the opportunity to learn. Okay? And no matter how old you are, no matter how long you've been in this industry, we always have something new to learn, right? And most importantly, when we have consistent teachers in the classroom, when we have consistent members in our school family, this creates the opportunity to make a difference in every single child that you work with, every single adult that you interact with. That's what we're really going for right here. And the choice is yours, all right? When we talk about intent, and this is why I started with intention and I'm going to close with intention. You can see now where all of this is intentional. You have to make this happen. The choice has to be yours. The only person you can change is yourself. Other people can't change for you. Your directors or your administrators cannot motivate you to be consistent. I cannot train you to be consistent. The choice is yours, right? Do you want to create these opportunities to teach, these opportunities to learn? Do you want to create these opportunities to make a difference? All right, and the choice is yours. All right, very cool. All right, so that was my presentation for today. And so those of you that are watching this live, I just posted the link to go to your worksheet for those of you that are wanting a certificate of completion for you. This will also be posted on my website. So if you're watching the recorded video, or if you came in a little bit late, I saw a couple of people that said they came late. Welcome. We're glad you're here. You made it. That's all that matters. You can always go back and rewatch this from the beginning, either on Facebook or it will be posted on my website here shortly. And so please share this also with anyone that you think would benefit from today's workshop. And so that'll all be posted right there. If you didn't catch that link, just go to my website, timthetrainer.com. You can go to online courses. They're in alphabetical order, and this one is called Consistency and Intent, and it should be there now. All right. Make sure you follow Facebook, Tim the Trainer on Facebook. That's where I post most of my upcoming webinars. I've got quite a few scheduled, and so I don't have the actual schedule posted because it is kind of a moving target and subject to change depending on the world and what's going on in my life. But usually a week or two in advance, I feel comfortable enough to post those. So make sure that you keep an eye on Facebook, and that's how you can tell what's going on. All right, very good. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Stay cool because it's hot out there. No matter what part of the state you're in, it's hot. And so I will see all of you very, very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.